Welcome to episode 261 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harmon, joined live from our virtual studio on the internet by my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who refuses to do New Year's resolutions, John Scott Sloat.
Have I refused to do New Year's resolutions in the past? Is that something?
Yeah.
For?
Well, see, I think that might have been like one of our very first episodes.
Really?
Yeah, like around episode 1 or 2, probably.
I'm not a big resolutions guy.
Well, I mean, you basically said, I don't like resolutions. I prefer goals, kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. I do prefer goals. That's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, not a big resolutions guy. Are you a big resolutions guy?
No, I mean, I'm basically in the same place you are in terms. So I prefer goals as opposed to resolutions.
Mm-hmm.
I just think they're more manageable. They're more achievable. It feels like there's a little bit less guilt, unnecessary guilt that comes from them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, here we are. We are recording on the last Monday of 2024 on
That's
December
right.
30th.
Yeah. Feels like all year we talk about how quickly the year's going by, and now it's by.
It's over. It's done. Stick a fork in it, man. This is our last episode of 2024. And this marks now 261 consecutive weeks.
Oh, yeah.
With an episode. 261.
That's a long time.
We are officially the Cal Ripken of the podcasting world. Well, if you'd like to get in touch with the show, you can find us on X at VNS Pod. In fact, this podcast is old enough that it started when X used to be called Twitter.
Yeah, that's true. And owned by somebody else.
Yeah, it's true. You can email the show, variousandsundarypodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook and on YouTube, and we would love for you to leave a 5-star rating and a review.
Yep.
That'd be nice.
Yeah. Maybe we should start reading reviews on air, and
that feels a little risky. Let's talk a little bit about your holiday, John. I mean, we just got past the Christmas holiday here. Tell us about all the festivities you were a part of.
Oh my goodness.
Or just some of them.
So did I tell the story of my car breaking down over the Christmas? Have I talked about that on pod? That was before the last episode. Did I tell you about this off pod?
You told me off. I'm pretty sure. I'm almost certain it's off the pod. Yeah, it was.
So I think that maybe 2 weeks ago, my wife and I were driving south for a couple of nights in Indianapolis, and I got the flashing, blinking check engine light on my Jeep, and pulled over. Had to get it towed. It was a hot mess. A piston stopped firing,
Yikes!
Which is a significant problem.
Yeah, that's no bueno.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been dealing with that. That's been a big part of my holiday, and all the fallout from that. And then, yeah, just been spending a lot of time here in Fort Wayne with my wife's side of the family, and her sister and husband were up from North Carolina, so good to spend time with them. We drove out to Columbus one day to see her grandparents, so we were in Columbus for about a 6 to 8 hour period. But yeah,
that's a long day trip.
So from here, it's about 2.5.
That's true.
So it's kind of like going to Indy. So yeah, 2.5 there, 2.5 back.
Nice.
So how about you guys? Holiday festivities? Anything stand out?
Well, we were in Omaha. And that was fun with Kate's family, and it was Autumn's first Christmas with Kate's family, and it's a big production on the Christmas day. It takes us about 3.5 hours to open gifts.
Wow.
Because we do them one by one.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way to do it.
And
that's the right way to do things.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the big meal and opening Christmas presents. And now that there are no young kids, like the youngest kid is I think Josh is like 14, 15. So, there's no kids getting up at 6:45 like, can we open presents? Can we open presents? Can we open presents? Like there's
Yeah,
none of that. So,
that's
a
nice.
little bit later start has been nice these past couple of years.
That's good.
So yeah, it was good. The drive out was fine. Drive back was fine. So
You ever had trouble on that drive or ever a snowstorm or anything
yes,
like that?
yeah, a few years ago, maybe it was 2021. Uh, Basically from Warsaw to Chicago was on 30 was basically just pure ice,
Ooh,
driving like 30 miles an hour at most.
yikes.
And then once we got to Chicago, the combination of the weather pattern and the fact that Chicago doesn't mess around when it comes to clearing the roads.
It does feel like Indiana sort of like lazily does roads, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, but I think some of that too is just resources. I mean,
Hmm.
but yeah, and then a couple years ago on the way back, we hit a little bit of an ice storm in Iowa that slowed us down but didn't make us stop. They shut down I-80 and had us rerouted off of 80 because there was a stretch of like, you know, 30, 40 cars that had slid off the road or, caused accidents. And so they literally just shut
Oh,
the whole thing
goodness.
down for
Yeah.
a
That's no
10-mile
good.
stretch and to clear it off. So it's not too bad. It's not too bad. But we did some top golf as a family. That was fun.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So all right, John, let's talk a little sports here.
Sure.
Um, During our time not recording here, there's been some college football games that have happened. The first round of the college football playoff happened, and uh, it was all chalk, and convincingly so.
Yeah, there wasn't,
None of the
was
games
there
were
anything
close.
close? Anything
No,
really close? No.
I mean, I think by score, the closest game was the Notre Dame IU game, but Notre Dame was up, you know, 27-3, and then
Yeah.
IU tacked on a couple of late touchdowns.
Hmm.
So Ohio State put the wood to Tennessee, which was refreshing to see.
Yeah, how's your
Um,
boss feel about that? Because he's a pretty big Tennessee fan.
he sent me a text. He was watching it. He was in Germany.
Right, that's right. He's in Europe. That's
So he
right.
texted me at like, hey, it's like end of the third quarter. He's like, text me, hey, it's like 5 a.m. here. I'm going to bed. Congrats on your win. Have a great Christmas. So,
Okay.
but I'm going to be honest. I don't think he listens to the podcast, so I think I can say this. Um, I'm not sure there's a fan base that talks more smack based on less than Tennessee. Like they've literally not won their conference in 30 years.
They won, when did they win their national championship?
98.
98? That's less than 30. Did they would not win the SEC that year?
Okay, so we're talking, sorry. So 2 plus 24, 26 years.
Yeah,
I rounded up.
let's be accurate, Matt.
Okay, 26 years. Not won their conference, not won a national title.
That was the year I moved to Tennessee, was the year UT won the national championship.
Yeah. And so I think because they're part of the SEC, they feel this like they feel that they can talk smack like the SEC, but like again, unless you're Bama, Georgia, even LSU, and occasionally throw in a little bit of like you get Auburn like pops up every like 8 to 10 years and has a great
Yeah.
year kind of thing. And
Hmm.
um like I, if you're not one of those teams in the SEC, then I don't know why you talk smack. So anyway, um we're to the quarterfinals now. And so we've got four matchups here. And like we did last time, we'll pick them. Let's start with Penn State versus Boise State. Who you got there?
I like Penn State.
Agreed. What about Notre Dame versus Georgia?
I like Georgia.
See, I want to pick Notre Dame. I really do.
They're going to let you down. I
That's
mean,
true.
they're I mean, they're going to let you down.
It's Georgia's only favored by 2 in that game.
Really? Goodness.
Yeah. Um, I'll go with a safe pick and go Georgia. What about Texas versus Clemson?
Texas.
Yeah. All right. Now here's the big one: Ohio State against Oregon.
I'm taking Ohio State.
Okay. Interesting. Interesting. It's so bizarre. Here's what tells you how broken the seeding system is. Oregon's the 1 seed. Ohio State's the 8 seed. Do you know who's favored in this game, John?
Um,
I'll save you the look. It's Ohio State by 2.5.
Yeah, 2.5. Also, we do have one wrong on there. It's not Texas Clemson. They already played. It's Texas Arizona
Oh,
State.
yeah. What am I doing? Yeah.
I was just like, that sounds wrong. I feel like we already did that one.
Yeah. Sorry.
I will still take Texas though.
Yeah. 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 Texas, Arizona State. Yeah, my bad there. I think Arizona State can make that interesting. But yeah.
Texas is 12.5 point favorite.
Yeah. I'm gonna pick Oregon because I just don't have enough confidence in our coaching staff. I know.
Wow.
I know.
Yowzers.
Now here's the thing. If Ohio State plays like they did against Tennessee, they will beat Oregon. That version of Ohio State is the best team in the country. I just don't know that they can reproduce that.
How much did they lose to Oregon by the first time?
1 point.
And they were at Oregon, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So you go to a neutral site. They say home field's worth 3 points. You play in a neutral site, you figure 1.5. That gives Ohio State the win.
Again, I am not. My confidence level in this coaching staff is very low.
Is Ryan Day canned if they lose this game?
No, not a chance. Not a chance.
If he had lost to the team they played last week, I can't even remember who it was.
Tennessee.
Tennessee, that's right. If they had lost to Tennessee, would he have been canned?
No.
You don't think so? Okay.
No. Don't think so. So, yeah. And maybe it's just my defense mechanism trying to keep my expectations low that I'm picking Oregon in this game. But, yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk a little NFL, John. Your Jets continue their woes. This time they decided, why bother with a 1-score loss? Let's just get thumped this week.
Yeah. It was not pretty. And the one thing that's been consistent all year, because not much has been, is our accrual of penalty yards. Let me just pull up the amount of penalties we got. Let's see. We managed 16 penalties for 120 yards. That's a good way to lose a game.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of penalties, John, you ready for a fun stat? Since you probably don't live in the Ohio State Twitter world, you probably don't know this stat.
Probably not.
Ohio State is dead last in Division I football for penalties called against their opponents.
Okay.
Meaning that Ohio State has had the fewest penalties called against their opponents of any team in the country. It's an interesting little tidbit there.
Yeah. So the Jets-Bills game was nationally televised. It was and it was the CBS #1 game.
Had Jim Nance and Tony Romo on the call, man.
Yeah, do you like Tony? I like Jim. Tony's hit or miss for me.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
there
I'm
are
about the same,
moments
I
where
think.
he's really, really good, and there's moments where
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Um, they started debating who is the MVP, Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
And they put up stats and they're like, oh, it's so close. I'm like, well, Lamar Jackson's ahead in every statistic. It's Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, there's still what? 2 games left in the season? 1 game
Yeah.
left? So,
Garrett Wilson was unhappy after the game.
well, he's basically requested a trade, has he not?
I don't think officially, like I haven't heard that.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
it would not surprise me if he requested a trade. It probably depends who they hire as the new coach.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but things are not good in Jets land. Not good at all.
No, but props to Aaron Rodgers for getting a late hit out of bounds penalty.
First of his career.
Yeah, I mean, throws the pick and then chases him down and blasts him. That's the wrong word. Pushes
Lays
him.
hands on. He laid hands on him, Matt.
He pushed him, but like not just on the white, but like past the white on the sideline, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, um, we should probably talk a little bit about the NFC North. I mean,
Have you
you've
followed
got,
this division much this year?
I mean, three terrific teams and one dumpster fire.
Yeah, I mean Chicago is, rebuilding perpetually, but the
John, it's almost like Justin Fields wasn't the problem there. It,
yeah, yeah.
it's interesting.
Actually, I'm kind of hoping the Jets bring in Justin Fields, tell you the truth. They're interviewing Ron Rivera for the head coaching vacancy, by the way.
Okay.
He's a name. And
Yes, he is a name.
yep. But the NFC North, you have the Lions, who are just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Uh, and they have Jared Goff as their quarterback, and they have a pretty good defense.
And the most aggressive coach in the NFL.
Yes. Uh, also does Applebee's commercials.
Yes. Yes.
I always think of myself as a waiter at Applebee's through grad school when
Yeah.
he's there taking orders and talking behind his play
Menu.
call
Yeah.
play sheet. Yeah. And then you have Minnesota, who's surprisingly good.
Yes, quarterbacked by former New York Jet quarterback Sam Darnold.
Yes, yes. And they're a fun team to watch too. Who knew Sam Darnold could play football? And then you have the Green Bay Packers with Jordan
Mhm.
Love, who I mean,
Yeah.
all three of those teams have I think 12 plus wins.
I think the Packers have 11 now. I
Okay, they're
think,
all 11
yeah,
plus wins.
still terrific though.
They're all most likely going to make the playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good division, and none of them are like eye-popping quarterbacks, which is
No.
impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. One other NFL note I wanted to hit on Saquon Barkley passing over the 2,000 yard mark for the season. And now the question is, will they play him in the last game next week?
To go after Eric Dickerson's mark?
Yeah, he's like 100 yards short, I think,
Right.
which he did that in 16 games.
Right.
Barkley
Not
has already
17.
played 16 games. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And it's against the Giants of all teams as well, his former team that let him go.
Oh, yeah. Well, Saquon's dad is a big Jets fan. Did you know this?
No.
Yeah. So when Saquon was with the Giants and the Giants played the Jets, Saquon's dad would show up to the game decked out in Jets gear
Wow.
and would like meet his son outside the Giants locker room and like walk out of the stadium with his son.
Wow. Okay.
That's a special relationship.
Yeah.
That's interesting to me.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of interesting, John, we need to move on to our main topic for the day. And since this is our last episode of the 2024 calendar year, we are going to talk about the top 10 theology stories of the year. This is an annual article that Colin Hansen does for the Gospel Coalition. And Yeah, let's just work through these
Yeah.
and we'll see which ones we want to linger over and which ones we don't. Why don't you start with it's, counting down backwards. So let's start with number 10 here, John.
Yeah. Number 10, Bible sales spike.
Yeah.
I assume that's an American. He talks about America immediately, so I assume that's
Hmm.
American Bible sales.
Yeah.
Um, why do you suppose Bible sales are up? He doesn't necessarily get into that, other than mentioning some election anxiety and some other things. But why are Bible sales up, would you say?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know that I have a good reason for that. I mean, um, I think part of it is the Bible market continues to just ever expand with more
Hmm.
and more niche kind of Bibles, which I think probably helps for sales. Um, he mentions podcasts with high quality narrators as well.
Hmm.
Um, I do think that that's a growing area of how people consume the Bible through audio, um, which again I think can be good or bad, right? I think the advantage is you might get more scripture into your life, but the reality is if you're consuming the Bible with audio, you're probably doing something else
Yeah.
at the same time. So
Hmm.
you're not necessarily giving your full undivided attention to scripture.
Yeah. Yeah. There's not a unless you're. I mean, I've known some people that have read the Bible and listened to it at the same time.
Hmm.
That can be good.
Yeah.
But yeah, a 22% increase. It's a little difficult to explain.
Yeah. It
And
is interesting that,
I was not
go ahead.
aware of that Bible sales were up 22% until this year, until this article came out.
No,
Were you aware?
I was not. It is noteworthy that the ESV did climb to number one in October. I don't think they've ever been the number one selling translation.
Hmm.
I think it's been pretty consistently either the NIV or the King James that have kind of topped those lists. So,
Interesting.
I mean, hopefully that's a good sign, right?
I hope so.
Especially if you're someone like me who, writes books about the Bible, you might hope that there's a trickle down effect on that.
Yeah, yeah.
Number nine, demographic collapse triggers national debate. In 2024, this civilizational, is that a word? Collapse, the greatest demographic shift since the bubonic plague in the 1300s,
That's a
finally
big
became a
statement.
widespread point of discussion. So basically, fertility rates declining significantly. Lots of countries either flirting with or falling below just the basic replacement rate of children being born. And in some countries like Japan, it's like I thought I read a number somewhere where they're losing something like maybe 500,000 people from their population a year.
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
That is a lot.
That's a lot of people. Hmm.
So, but it is interesting. I mean, it has started to show up in some of the political conversations.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that this does not touch, I know I've done some reading on that. It's not just that, and he kind of goes into like there seems to be how to cure the modern malaise of individuals that inhibits marriage and child rearing. I think that's a problem for sure. I also think infertility is on the rise as well. Uh,
Sure.
globally, people are struggling to conceive. Um,
Hmm.
also,
Yeah, I think that's the case. I mean, and this is what makes this topic so hard to talk about, right? Because there's a
hmm
lot of moving pieces. Because you do have people who want children but are not biologically capable of having them.
hmm
And then you've got people who are biologically capable but not having them
hmm
for a variety of reasons, whether it's just I don't want kids, or oh, this world's so evil and awful, I can't imagine bringing a kid into this kind of world kind of stuff, or
yeah,
well, who can ever afford to have kids these days kind of, you know, reasoning as well. But I do think Colin's onto something when he talks about uh, individualism plays a big part in this, I think.
Hmm.
And, also when you weigh in people getting married later.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think also, I mean, there's also economic realities, right? It is harder for a family. It's harder for say a husband to support his family on his income alone
Yeah.
and buy a house, have kids at home, all those sorts of things. Like I think it is more challenging economically to do that than it used to be 50 years ago.
Yeah. I heard a statistic somewhere that male wages, if adjusted for inflation, are more or less the same than they were in 1970. Whereas female wages have just continued to climb and go up and up and up.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, but when you pair that with um, so the cost of a house compared to what it was 50 years ago,
oh yeah.
the cost of education, the cost of healthcare,
Hmm.
all those sorts of things are much more expensive, which is something that is a real concern.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I had a conversation with my dad recently where he was telling me his first house that he bought on Long Island, he got for like in the 80s, got it for like 12.5%. I went, wow, that's crazy. Well, he also paid, 10% of what it costs now to buy a house.
Yeah,
It's just so much cheaper when you were buying homes in the 70s and 80s than it is now.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Number eight, main
Yep. Oh, is it
main.
me?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Mainline decline heightens need for global South leadership. This is about the United Methodist Church mostly. They wanted to affirm same-sex marriage as a denomination, and a number of South American, African churches said nope. And something like what was it? 26% of United Methodist churches left the denomination for a new uh, formed denomination called Global Methodist Church.
Yeah, I mean, really, this is just an acceleration of what's been happening for the past 50 years.
And I think this hit Warsaw, Indiana. I believe the local United Methodist Church closed.
Oh, it did. I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, yeah, I believe so. I could be wrong, but I believe so. They also mention the Anglican bishop who also signed on to same-sex marriage,
Yeah.
resigned because he covered up sexual abuse.
Hmm.
And they talk about, places like Africa that are continuing to see growth of population and church, kind of tying the last one in.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, one of the reasons why I think more and more seminaries are becoming uh, far more proactive in trying to get theological education into, the global South and Africa and those other places, is because that's really where the future leadership of the global church probably is coming from.
I think this is one, Matt, and I'd be interested. This is one that feels that as I read, I'm like, wow, this is a really big deal that I did not feel at all. That I didn't think about too much. That
But
didn't
we're not
impact.
really, but we're not really connected to any mainline
No,
churches.
no. I mean, I know several United Methodists, right?
Yeah.
Um, but it feels huge, and it didn't impact my. I guess I didn't think of this. I kind of went, well, like, was that this year when I
Yeah.
read this one?
Yeah. Number seven, assisted suicide advances in the UK. Um, again, this is not something that is fully settled. It's working its way through their legislative process, but the UK is moving towards that, which follows trends in Canada and other places where assisted suicide under certain circumstances is permitted. So I don't know if there's much more that I have on that.
Yeah, other than this feels like a global thing, and less of a. This isn't as big of a conversation in America just yet. What did you think
Yeah.
of Andy Crouch saying you have the right to die, then you'll feel the obligation to die, and then for the greater good, you're required to die, that progression is going to take place.
Well, I think and this probably touches on politics a little bit, but I think it is reasonable to think that you could have that kind of progression in countries where uh, healthcare is run by the government,
Yeah.
where the government makes decisions about what you get and what you don't get.
Hmm.
And you could envision the government deciding, well, we're not going to pay for that really expensive treatment because the odds of it actually extending your life, or maybe it'll extend your life for a year, so we won't pay for it. You start to get the government involved in those kind of decisions, and yeah, you start seeing that being a possibility, I think.
Yeah.
All right, number six.
This one's me. I have the evens.
You have the even.
Amid IVF and virtual fertilization backlash, GOP becomes pro-choice. Yeah, this one feels like it looms large in my mind. This one felt like it ate up a good bit of my summer and fall, where we were watching the GOP platform come out as
Yeah.
pro-choice for the first time, I think, ever, and he ties it to this Alabama ruling about embryos as children, therefore, uh, you know, um, therefore, there's been some backlash by GOP
Mhm.
leadership against
Yeah.
pro-life policies.
Yeah. And, let's be honest, even within the evangelical church, there's a range of opinions on IVF and what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, what's ethical, what's biblical. Um, that is certainly not something where there's a clear, overwhelming consensus among evangelicals about that area for sure.
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah. It's been hard. It's been weird to watch the GOP become pro-choice.
Yeah,
That felt like a pretty big stalwart of them being pro-life, and yeah, it's sad that we don't have a pro-life party
yeah, that's
because
correct.
the libertarians certainly aren't there. The
No,
Democrats aren't there. Now the Republicans aren't there either.
yeah. Number five, that's me, right? Yeah, I'm the odds. Yep.
You're the odd.
Theological educators seek foothold amid overall slide in student enrollment. Um, yeah, I don't know that there's a ton to say here. This is the world we live in. I don't know how interesting this is for folks beyond our little, you know, our world, but yeah, I will point out that during the 23-24 school year, Grace Theological Seminary was the fourth fastest growing seminary in the country.
Yeah.
And
I
so we've been blessed to have some growth even as other schools have struggled to try to plateau, let alone try to grow.
I mean, you could take out theological educators and put Christian colleges in there as well. Um, and there's a handful of Christian colleges that are growing, and there's a handful that are really shrinking quite quickly.
Yeah.
And you want to be on the right side of that.
Yeah. Though I think the seminary trend has been going on for far longer than the Christian college trend
Yeah,
has.
yeah, yeah. The Christian college one is probably more tied to birth rate. Um,
Yeah. The seminary one's been going on for 15 years.
yeah, yeah.
Number four, John.
Paris flaunts uh, post-Christian buffet. Is that what, before Notre Dame Cathedral reopens? Interesting to tie those two events together because you have the Paris Olympics, right, where the opening ceremony sort of boy, that social media. Remember that was a firestorm on social
Oh
media for a
yeah.
couple of days there, where they redid the Lord's Supper, and it was a debate whether they redid the Lord's
Yeah.
Supper or not for a time.
Yep.
And then and tying that to, you know, he interestingly says, uh, that Paris at least cares enough about Christianity to rebuild Notre Dame.
Hmm.
Excuse me, Notre Dame.
There you
Um,
go.
um, which is
But
interesting.
that's such
Tourism,
that's a cultural thing. Like I don't see that as
tourism.
anything remotely related to spirituality.
Hmm.
So, you know, but all
Yes.
right.
Here's the line. And the opening ceremonies launched a million hot takes and even hotter rebuttals over the Last Supper parody.
Yes.
I think we've landed on that was a parody of
Yeah,
Last Supper,
I
right?
think so. Yeah. All right. Number three, cast review tells the truth about transgender treatments.
There's another
So the
UK
cat,
one.
yes, the UK, yes, largest review ever undertaken in the field of transgender health. Um, and basically has had the effect of pushing back against some of the treatments for gender transitions. And what's striking to me about this one is that as there's been pushback in the UK and a pulling back on some of the medical treatments, it feels like the US is only intended on continuing forward and accelerating. Though there are some signs that, there's some pushback in the courts.
Yeah, yeah. It's this one was cast review. I knew what that was about. Like
Yeah.
I knew what that was. I don't know if I'd put that as number three on this list.
Would you put it lower or higher?
I'd probably have it at seven or eight.
Really? See, I'd be tempted to at least put it here, maybe even higher,
Hmm.
because this is such a cultural um, shift in terms of is the pushback against some of the gender ideology finally working outside of Christian circles, where you've
Yeah.
got non-Christians saying this is crazy, like we've gone too far on this. But anyway, number two, John.
Uh, and I don't know why this one's number two. Maybe you can explain it to me. Gen Z shows signs of spiritual revival. It talks about specifically men identifying for the first time as religious. 14,000 young adults signing up for CrossCon. Um, so yeah, apparently there are at least some indications that Gen Z is moving in a more spiritual direction.
Yeah, I
Would you have
think
put this number two?
no, I think it's fair to have it on the list, but I don't know that I would put it number two. Um, yeah, and I don't know that I would put number one here, but here it is. Trump wins presidential election.
Yeah, that for me that happened this year, right?
Yeah,
But I don't know that it was a theological story.
yeah. It just that felt odd to me.
It felt like,
Which
oh, it's an election year. This has got to be on the list.
I guess. Um, but something that didn't make the list that I'm a little surprised is the discussion over Christian nationalism
Yeah,
and
yeah.
even some of the splintering within uh, those who identify themselves as Christian nationalists and the splintering taking place between certain factions of that. Um, and I hesitate to use this terminology, but the rise of the woke right, some of that sort of stuff. I'm a little surprised,
Hmm.
even if you don't like that terminology. I'm a little surprised that doesn't make the list here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That one surprised me. It also surprised me that we had nothing about wars. We've had wars in several of these most recent lists. I guess no new wars, I guess, other than the collapse of Syria
Yeah.
starting. But I mean, we still have all those wars ongoing that have happened in the last 5 years. Uh,
Yeah.
so I'm surprised
Yeah.
that this didn't make the list as well.
Yeah. It is for a story that's entitled Top 10 Theology Stories. Um, I mean, you can make the argument all these have theological implications or have theological uh, roots, but yeah, I think this list surprised me a little bit in some of the choices for a top 10 theology stories to, especially to have number one, Trump wins the presidency.
Yeah, I miss the days when it was, well, N.T. Wright has this view of justification. That's a theology story.
Yeah. Or John Piper tweeting at Rob Bell, farewell, Rob Bell.
Farewell,
Yeah.
Mr. Pell. Yeah.
All right. I think that brings our discussion to a close. So, time now for this day in sports history.
All right, this day in sports history, December 31st, the last day of the year, 2024 year of our Lord. 1982, American college football coach Paul Bear Bryant ends his career with the University of Alabama, 323 wins.
Yep, Bear Bryant.
1983, Indian cricket opening batsman Sunil Gavaskar scores an unbeaten 236 in drawn six test versus West Indies Chennai. I have no idea. His fourth test double century and 30th century surpassing Don Bradman's record of 29.
Hmm.
That was a great moment.
Okay. Yeah.
1988, Toronto's Ed uh, Olszewski,
I think it's just Olchik.
Olczyk, and Gary Lehman score goals just 4 seconds apart in the third period, tying NHL record for fastest two goals by one team. Leafs beat Quebec 6-5.
There you go.
2007, Tom Brady, oh boy, sets then NFL record throwing his 50th touchdown pass. And the New England Patriots become the first NFL team in history to finish the regular season 16-0, only to go on to lose to Eli Manning in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's interesting that last part was not part of the script there.
Uh, which is what Eli Manning will get into the Hall of Fame because of that game. The two
Yeah, well, he
games
beat
where he
beat him twice.
beat him twice in the Super Bowl because
Yeah,
he beat Tom Brady twice in the Super Bowl.
yeah.
Not because he was any good. 2020, Milwaukee Bucks break NBA record for most three-pointers made by a team in a single game with 29 in a dominant 144-97 victory over the Heat in Miami.
So many threes.
Yeah, that's a lot of threes. Is J.R. Smith on that team?
So who do you like out of that list?
I probably like Bear Bryant.
I can go with that. Let's do that. So Bear Bryant it is. One thing you liked.
I believe, officially migrated away from Google Chrome and have begun to use Arc browser. You familiar with
Okay.
this?
I'm not.
Uh, they have a whole system for how you surf the internet. One, they don't take or sell any of your data, unlike Google Chrome. Um, and so it runs a bit quicker. And it has I think, a better system for surfing the web with a sidebar rather than that top bar. And one of the nice features it has is it automatically closes tabs after 12 hours of inactivity,
Whoa.
which is pretty awesome. So you don't end up with like a gajillion tabs.
See, that's just not a problem for me.
Oh,
Like,
it's a big problem for me. I'll open up tabs that I'm like, this is from like 6 weeks ago. Um,
do you never shut down your computer?
only when it needs an update.
Okay.
But Arc
Okay.
browser is the one thing I like.
Okay. I'm going to go with an audiobook that I listened to on the drive out to Omaha and back. It's called Codename Blue Wren, the true story of America's most dangerous female spy. It's a story of a woman named Anna Montez, who was a spy for Cuba.
Oh, wow.
And she worked for many years for the Defense Department.
Wait. A spy for Cuba or a spy of America in Cuba?
A spy for Cuba. She was embedded within the Defense Department, but she was spying for Cuba.
Okay. Interesting.
So she was essentially giving away highly classified information to Fidel Castro. And one of the reasons that most people have never heard of her is that she was arrested like a month after 9/11.
Really?
Yeah. So every like this investigation had been building and they were getting their ducks in a row, and then 9/11 happens. And so a month after 9/11, she gets arrested. But of course, a month after 9/11, all anyone can think about is, Al Qaeda, Osama bin Laden. They're not thinking about Cuba and Castro. But it's the story of how she spied for Cuba and how her sister, who she was not especially close with, was actually an FBI agent, along with her brother-in-law. And they had no idea. They were completely caught off guard by this. So,
whoa.
I mean, I would not put this as a great book, but it's a good one. It was enough to keep me alert and awake across the plains of Iowa and Illinois. So,
wow.
That is my one thing I liked.
So is she an American citizen then?
Yes. Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, John, we've talked about our holiday experiences. We've talked about some college football, playoff football, and NFL. We've talked the top 10 theology stories of 2024. We've talked about Bear Bryant ending his career at Alabama. We've talked about Arc Browser. And we've talked about Codename Blue Wren. So I think, by definition, we have covered our various and sundry topics. And so all that's left to say is, until next time, the Lord bless y'all real good.
Later.